Hi everybody, and welcome to RecTech's Backyard Clinic number 2. If you recall from clinic number 1, our focus was on water testing of our main 5 parameters. That's chlorine, pH, total alkalinity, calcium hardness, and cyanuric acid. So now that we've know how to do those tests, clinic number 2, we're going to focus on the addition of the chemicals, both storage and handling of the chemicals, addition into your pool, and so on. So stay tuned, we'll be back in just a moment with clinic number 2. As we mentioned earlier, we're going to be covering in clinic number 2 our addition of our chemicals. So we said our 5 main parameters of testing are chlorine. So here we have different types of chlorine, which we'll go through in more detail in a moment, but here's some samples there. Our next parameter is pH, and so we have different types of pH adjustment here. Hand in hand, like we mentioned in our other clinic, is alkalinity. So we use the same type of chemicals, in particular the muriatic acid, in dealing with alkalinity. The next parameter that we're going to talk about is our calcium levels, and here's a sample of some calcium product. And finally is our stabilizer. If we come back over here, our cyanuric acid test, and making sure our chlorine stays in the water where we want it to be using up and not in the air, and that's going to do that. We're also going to spend just a bit of time on some specialty chemicals. We didn't go through the test for these specialty chemicals, but it is important that we do mention them. So stay tuned, and our first addition of chemicals is going to be our most important one, and that's chlorine. We'll see you in just a minute. Okay, welcome back. And before we get into chemicals and what chemicals that at what time and things like that, I think it's important to talk about the safety side, both in storage and handling. So first of all, in storage, as a general rule, if at all possible, you want to store these chemicals in a dry, cooler space if possible. And I like to generally have my dry chemicals in one part of the room or in a separate room altogether if possible, and my liquid chemicals in another part of the room. In particular when it comes to chlorine and acid, and we'll talk about that combination later, not a good one. So we want to try to make sure we store our chemicals properly. We always want to look at the manual of the instructions. They detail both how to add chemicals and how to store them. So we want to make sure that everything gets stored properly. When it comes to the handling, it's important that we wear some protective safety gear, especially when we're dealing with chlorine and acid. These are very corrosive products and can damage your pool, it can damage your clothes and even your skin if it's in a high enough concentration. So always a good idea to have a pair of rubber gloves, utility gloves of some kind that we can put on, so if any chemical does splash onto our hands, we're protected. We should also wear safety glasses, which are in this case here. Safety glasses, which will protect our eyes if we get any splash chemicals. And if you want to take it even one step further, we can go with safety goggles. The main difference between the glasses and the goggles is the glasses will protect the eyes, the goggles will protect the eyes, and will also protect your skin around. So any splash up at all is going to hit the plastic and not your eyes. One other thing that you could do that I don't have here as one more added protection would be the face shield. As I'm doing my tests, I'm going to focus on the wearing the gloves, obviously, and my safety glasses. Should also make sure that maybe an apron if you want to do something like that. This is kind of older clothes, so I'm cool with that. One other thing you may want to look into is that every product has what's called an MSDS sheet. It's a material safety data sheet. This sheet can be made available when you buy the product. You can ask for it, and it gives you all the details on how to store the chemical, how to use it, what its property makeup is, and most importantly, if you do get some on you, in your eyes or what have you, how to, the first aid requirements with that product. So any chemical they get from your pool company, if you ask for, will provide you these MSDS sheets. You can also find them online for each one of the chemicals as well. So that's kind of a quick snapshot of the safety, handling, and storage of your chemicals. in general terms. Now we're going to get into each one of the chemicals individually. So we'll see you in just a moment. Okay, before we get into adding chemicals into the pool, we need to know how much to add. We just don't want to go into a situation where we just grab and start dumping in. After we've done our tests, we may need to raise our chlorine by 10 parts per million. So we want to make sure we raise it by 10 parts, not 15 parts, not 20, not 30. We want to be fairly accurate in that test. So the best way to do that is I need to know the volume of the water in my pool. So when I'm reading the instructions on the containers, it'll say if you need to raise 10 parts per million of your chlorine level, add per 10,000 liters X number of grams or X number of liters into the pool. And so the only way you can do that accurately is if you know what the volume is. As you can see from our pool, very difficult to do. A little more complicated because of all the curves and different depths. If you have a standard rectangular pool, I'm going to put the formula up for you right now on how you can quickly get the gallonage of your pool. Ours, what I had to do here is I had to break it into sections and get the length, width, and the depth, and then add those sections together in order to get the total volume of our pool, which is just under 100,000 liters. You may look, wow, that's quite a bit, but the pool here is 11 feet deep, so we have to take into consideration the length, the width, and the depth to come up with our total our liters. Once we have our liters, now we can more accurately say I need X number of chemicals in order to do that. The first set of chemicals we're going to look at is chlorine. So here we are here. All right, now that we have our total liters of water and we have our products here, we can get into the addition of some of the chemicals. First one, we're starting with chlorine, by far the most important chemical we're going to be adding into our pool. Obviously, it kills any bacteria, it helps with algae. It really makes sure that if there are any bacteria in the water that may make us sick, that the chlorine will kill it. So I know there are salt systems out here. They work extremely well. I don't have one yet, maybe someday. But right now I'm using chlorine in its raw form. So I brought the different types of chlorine, and we're going to go through it. So the first one, first of all, I got my gloves on, I got my safety glasses here. So the first one that we're going to look at is liquid chlorine. Very popular. Get it at your local pool company. You usually have to buy your own jugs, and you're good to go. Thing about this, this is chlorine in its weakest form. So in a liquid, it's 12% chlorine. Okay, so it's not nearly as dangerous for handling, although it is very bulky compared to the other product because it's in such a large percentage. But basically, they take chlorine and mix it with some water and get it in a 12% form. That's that one. The next one is our tablets. Now this is chlorine in a solid form. This gets dumped directly into the pool. This is eroded in our skimmer box. This has a much higher concentration of chlorine, 65%. Okay, so you can see there's as much or more chlorine in this little tablet than this entire jug because of the high concentration. We'll go through the addition of that in a minute. And the last one we're looking at is granular, and it runs at about 70% chlorine. It's the highest in the concentrations. You can see it's in the granular form, but it is by far the most unstable. So you got to be very careful in dealing with these chemicals. As a general rule, whenever we're adding chemicals, we always have a mixing container of some kind. We fill that with water, and we add the chemical to the water. We don't want to be putting dry chlorine in a bucket, then adding water. This product can destabilize if it gets a little bit of moisture on it, and it can actually convert, because there's so much chlorine in here, that little bit of water can actually convert it back to a gas, and if we breathe that in, not a great thing. So all in all, this one here is the safest product to use, but it's very bulky. This is in a higher concentration. It's a bit more convenient. Okay, so like I said, the chlorine you can add directly to your pool. So all you have to do is undo the one lid, undo the second lid. Sorry, we've undid the lid here. Then we're going to undo the vent on the back, And what that's going to do is it's just going to allow it to flow out a little bit easier. It allows air in the back, so you don't get as much gurgling in the front. And then what you want to do is you want to broadcast it around your pool. I like to put extra chemical wherever my returns are, because that's going to dissipate it throughout the pool a lot better. And that's it. I'll just show you quickly. And it goes. That's it. Now when it comes to the pucks, which is our second, they're typically individually wrapped, and that's for safety, and again, making sure that we don't get any moisture in here. A couple things with it. I highly recommend all chemicals. You still wear the gloves, you still have the eye protection. So if we go over to our skimmer over here, we open up our tablet, and like I said, it's an erosion feeder. It's an erosion chlorine. So we put it in our skimmer box, and as the water's flowing over it, it erodes it and puts it directly into the pool. I like to use the liquid chlorine more as, if I need chlorine really quickly, I'm going to dump it in. But for my regular day-to-day use, I like to use the pucks. I just find that they're a lot more convenient. I can put one of those in. It'll typically last a day or two, and it'll maintain good levels. Adding the tablet into your skimmer box, I would recommend, you could just drop it in there. Problem is, it's going to go kaplump. Make sure you have your safety glasses on so it doesn't spray up into your face. So better than that is to remove the basket. Okay. Take your puck, place it in, place it back in, and it'll start eroding and adding chlorine into your pool. The last method, go back over here, is the granular. Like I mentioned, in the granular form, it's in its highest concentration, so it's the least stable of all the chlorine. So we must respect it by reading the instructions carefully on how to add it. So what I've done here is I've already pulled some water out of the pool, and then based on how much ppm or how much I want to raise per parts per million, I would either do a half a scoop, a quarter scoop, or what have you. My chlorine levels are good right now. I don't want to add this in, but I do want to show you. So let's say I'm going with a quarter cup. So I scoop it out. Very important. I have the water. I add the chemical to the water. I put about maybe 1/8 of a cup. Maybe a bit more in there. Then I have my stirring stick. I always like to use the same. I have a couple of buckets that I use for chemicals, and that's all I use them for. You get dirt and debris in there, and you're mixing up chlorine, it's going to start to react to that bacteria right away. So you want to make sure you use a nice clean container. Stir. Make sure as stirred up as possible. Like I said, this is in its highest concentration, so if you need chlorine really quickly, you put this in. A lot of people will call it shockle, where I'm actually bringing it up over what would be, normal swimming levels to a higher level, and that may be because the pool's turned a bit green. It's gone a couple days without chlorine, and I need to get that chlorine level back up quickly. Or I have some algae. This works really well. When I pour in the liquid, it's only 12% to start with, so when I dump it in over a stain, by the time it gets to that stain, it's totally liquefied, doesn't have much of an effect. When I use the granular, because it's in a much higher concentration, if I have some algae, I can pour this right on in the area, and it'll make its way down, it'll stay, it'll take a while to get into solution, and boom, it'll go right down onto the stain. Just be very careful when you're adding this product. Like I said, it's a high concentration. So here I have a concrete pool, pretty safe. I can put the chemical in. Just be careful with your liner pool. You don't want to bleach it. So again, follow the instructions. How many ppms I want to raise it to, how many liters I have in my pool. It'll tell you exactly how much to add. And this is just distributed around the pool. Again, I like to focus around the returns. So when it hits those returns, it dissipates it out into the water a lot faster. All right, we're going to take a little break. We'll come back in a minute, and we're going to talk about pH adjustment. I'll see you then. Hi everybody and welcome back. And now that we've done our addition of our chlorine, our next of the 5 parameters is our pH, an adjustment to pH. We're actually going to talk about pH and alkalinity at the same time because both of them carry a lot of the same properties and how we adjust them. So I have in front of me actually some pH and some acid products. So here's a sample of some pH down or some pH up. Now, most of us, when we're using chlorine, we're going to be dealing with high levels of pH. That's typical for granular chlorine, liquid chlorine in the puck form. So we're always looking to drive that pH level down. Again, because we know the amount of liters of water in our pool, we can always turn to the side and read the instructions. So if I want to lower my pH by 10 parts per million, it's going to say you're going to add X number of grams into the pool in order to do that. Again, whenever we're adding chemicals, we want to take water. Here's a nice clean bucket. Again, making sure the bucket is clean. We add the chemical into the water and then we add it into the pool. Now, the other product that I have here is called muriatic acid. And I'm kind of old school, commercial. Every product that you buy at your local pool company, like pH Down, for example, is derived from a raw product. And in the case of a pH Down, muriatic acid does the exact same thing, but it's in a raw form. This is just a little more safer. It doesn't have near the concentration as muriatic acid. But commercially, we would use muriatic acid because we would use a lot more of it, and it's just a lot cheaper and much more effective. But you got to be very, very safe with it. It is an acid. It can eat into your clothes, into your skin. So it's very important that you have your gloves and your safety gear on when you're handling it. Okay. But again, I like to use it because it gets me my results. It's in its rawest form. I'm not really big on adding a bunch of chemicals into the pool. So if I need to add it, if I can add it in its raw form, it's going to have least effect on other parts of the pool. So if I need to raise my my pH, and what I do, once I have my exact amount that I need, I'll just peel that off. And then I would take my chlorine, or my water from the pool, and I would add in here. I'm adding in about 1/4 of a jug. And I need to adjust my pH in the water. It is a bit high right now, so I'm going to add this in. So again, I like to distribute it around the pool so you get down nice and low so you don't get much splash. And just broadcast it into the water. Now, I'm going to put most of it over here because this is where my returns are. Okay, when I add it in where the returns are, it's going to dissipate a little bit better. Okay, we'll put a little over on this return. And I have one more over here. Wherever possible, I get down nice and low so it doesn't splash up. There we go. And that, according to the liters I have in the pool and how much I need to raise it to lower it a couple parts per million, that should do it, the trick for me. So I'll redo that test, just rinsing it out now. And I'll redo that test in a couple hours, and hopefully it's come down a couple parts per million. We're back in the range where we need to be. With water, again, I know my dosage based on how many liters I have in my pool. I put X number of grams into the bucket, mix it, and broadcast it around the pool. Now, when it comes to, so that's pH. Now, at the same time, if I'm using muriatic acid, like I did there, I can also lower my total alkalinity. As I mentioned in the first clinic, alkalinity and pH, they run hand in hand. So if I have a high alkalinity, I'm going to have a high pH. If I have a low alkalinity, I'm going to have a lower pH. So one is a buffer to the other. So I want to make sure that my total alkalinity
is in the lower part of the range when I'm using chlorine, because I know chlorine has a high pH. The only thing that I would do different when adding this acid for a pH lower or alkalinity, if I'm using it for alkalinity, I would use basically the same amount, but I would want to actually turn on as many features as I have in the pool, because when I add it, I want it to agitate and get into the water very quickly, and that's what's going to drop that alkalinity. So in that case, I would turn on my water slides, my water features, whatever I have, and then I would broadcast it over the pool, maybe let it run for 15 minutes or so, turn it off, and hopefully that will have lowered my total alkalinity. So there, we dealt with our chlorine, our pH, and our alkalinity. Now, I should mention one thing. If we're using something like bromine, we may have to be adding a pH product, a pH up product. So in that case, I would go to the residential version, which is this. But all chemicals, dry chemicals, liquid chemicals are added the same way. I take some water, add the appropriate dosage into the water, mix it, and broadcast it around the pool. There we go. We'll be back in a few minutes. We'll talk about calcium hardness. See you then. Okay, so we've looked at our chlorine as our first parameter. Second was pH. Our third was alkalinity. Our fourth is calcium. As we mentioned when we were doing the water tests, levels of calcium in our water are very important. Play more of a mechanical role than they do in comfort. But if we don't have enough calcium and our pool is painted or it's grouted and tiled, the pool will always look to balance itself, so it'll try to draw it out of those products if it's not in the pool. So we want to make sure we have good levels. On the other side, we don't want to have too much, because if we have too much calcium, then it starts to build up, and it starts to build up on our railings, and we start to see white powder on the deck, and we'll get build up in our piping. So it is an important test. It's not done as regularly, about every 3 weeks or so, but still a very important test. If I have low calcium levels, which in the area we live is never typically the issue, it's usually we're having to lower our alkalinity levels. But if we find that we have soft water, then typically that means that we have lower calcium levels in the water. If we have hard water, it means we have more. And like I said here, we have the tendency to have a bit more than less. But I'll go through the less, what we do there. So like every other chemical, we grab some water from the pool, put it in our clean bucket, based on the size of our pool and what the instructions say, how many grams we would add in. In the case of our pool here, I'm going to be adding in several of these. I don't need calcium in the water, but let's say I needed 10. So I would scoop in 10 scoops. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then I mix my chemical up. Like I said, I don't need any in here. I already have high calcium levels, but I would mix it up. Now, it's not a real corrosive chemical. So if it's not totally dissolved and some of it ends up sitting on the bottom of your pool, it'll eventually dissolve. It's not going to cause any issue. And then like all other chemicals, I just broadcast it around the pool. Again, I'm not putting it in because I don't need it here. And I add in what I need based on my calculations. So a lot of pools, it may be a lot more than that. I may get another little scooper to help that along. And then, next day, I can recheck that and see what that level's at. Calcium is directly related to the addition of water, so it's very important at the beginning, before we fill the pool, that we know our calcium levels, so we know how to deal with that. Once your pool is full and you're in operation, the reason we don't have to do this test that often is calcium levels will only be adjusted based on new water going into the pool. So, if it rains or you backwash or you got a lot of swimmers pulling water out of the pool and putting new water into the pool, that's where you're going to see the biggest calcium adjustments. But if I need to lower my calcium, So this is a product used. It's just calcium flakes, and it just adds the calcium into the pool. A lot of places, if I need to lower the calcium, if I have lower levels, I just add new makeup water, and typically that's going to lower my calcium levels. So that's how I raise calcium. We have one more parameter to talk about, and that's stabilizer. So make sure you join us for that last section. We'll see you then. Okay, welcome back. We're going to discuss our last of our 5 parameters, and that's cyanuric acid. And we use a product called stabilizer to increase that level in our pool. And how the cyanuric acid works, and stabilizer in particular, is that when our pool is stabilized, what it does is it takes the molecule product and attaches to water, then the product, and the product also attaches to chlorine. So what it does is it keeps chlorine in solution so it can do its job. If we don't stabilize our water and it's very sunny, it just gets evaporated out of the pool. So we end up using a lot more chemical, costs us more money, it's not as good for the environment. So it's very important at the beginning of the year to stabilize your water. So in this case here, we need to raise it by 30 parts per million in order to get it well into the range. And this is not as scientific as the other ones that X number of product per parts per million. But I'm going to show you a trick that I learned years ago on how we can get this stabilizer into the pool fairly quickly, and because it does not dissolve right away, like I mentioned. So what I've done here is I've taken a pair of pantyhose and I've draped it over the container, the stabilizer container, like you can see here. And then what I do is I just dump some of the stabilizer into the pantyhose. So in this case here, I'm going to dump maybe half of it in here, like so. And what I'll do is I'll take this off. Tap that down in. Tie it up, and now I have a little pouch that I can put in my skimmer box, and now that'll erode over the next day and put that stabilizer into the pool. So come on over to our skimmer. Actually, it doesn't matter here, but well, we have a chlorine puck in here, but that's okay. If you have multiple skimmers, you can put your chlorine puck in one, and you can put your stabilizer in the other, and then all you do, place that inside there. That's it. And like I said, over the next day or two, it'll erode away. You're left with the pantyhose, you throw them out, and now you got stabilizer in your pool. And that was our final parameter. We got one more little section. We're going to talk about specialty chemicals. And yeah, so stick around. We'll be right back. All right, the last area we're going to talk about, even though we didn't include this in our 5 parameters of testing, are specialty chemicals that can be added into the pool to help with a variety of different things. First one we'll talk about is an algicide. An algicide, I would recommend that be added once a week, okay, as a preventative measure to get rid of algae in the pool. Now, if you have algae in your pool or your water's green, I send you back to chlorine to get it back and make sure you get enough chlorine in the pool. The algicide is more of a preventative product than it is a reactive product. So we use it to prevent the algae in the first place. It does work to some degree if the algae is there, but your better product there will be direct chlorine to get rid of it. So this is a product that's added, like I said, once a week. Again, once I know my total liters in the pool, it'll tell me how much I need to add on a first-time application or a weekly preventative maintenance. Next one we're going to look at here is a stain prevent. So there is always iron, copper in our water depending on where our water comes from. So I may want to, basically what this product does is when I add it, it keeps that iron content in solution. It doesn't get rid of the iron, doesn't get rid of the copper, but it links itself and keeps it in solution so it doesn't drop out onto your bottom and stain your bottom. So again, this is, I wouldn't put this in weekly, this is more of a monthly product, but this is an important one to add at the beginning of your season to ensure if there are high levels of
copper or iron, again, they don't stain your pool. The next one we're going to look at is clarifier. And a clarifier is a product, it's like a flocculant agent, and what it does is it groups the debris that's in your water, it groups it into larger particles so your filter system can filter it out easier. This is okay to be using once in a while when I want that extra sparkle. I've got guests coming over, so the night before I may add a bit in. If you're having to use this on a regular basis, there's another issue with your pool in that your filtration system should be able to keep your water clear. And if you're having to add this in all the time in order for that to happen, then you may want to check the sand or your filter medium to see what's up there. So that's my clarifier. And then the last thing we'll mention is an oxidizer. Not as critical in an outdoor pool as it is an indoor, but basically when we take free available chlorine and we add bacteria to it, we get a byproduct called chloramines. And that's what we smell when we're at an indoor pool or a hotel and we can smell the chlorine in the air, we smell it on our body. It's combined chlorine that I smell. And so what this product does is once that chlorine is combined with bacteria, this product will release it from the water, put it into the air so we don't smell it anymore. So this is typically a monthly product that can be added in. I don't use this in an outdoor pool because we got enough fresh air moving around that, but if you want a bit extra bather comfort, we can add that in. So there's kind of our specialty products. We've gone through all of our water testing. We've gone through the addition of our chemicals into the pool. So that concludes this clinic. And make sure you join us for our third clinic. There we're going to talk about things like your skimmers, skimmer baskets, hair lint baskets, skimming your pool, brushing your pool, things that are going to help keep your water clear. So make sure you join us. That'll be coming out shortly. And I'd just like to take a moment to thank you for joining us for today's clinic. I hope you found it informative. I know I enjoyed doing it, and I hope you enjoyed having a chance to listen and see it. If you do have any questions or any comments about any of the information we're showing, or if you're having problems with your own pool, you can contact us at all the links that are in the description below. So yeah, please do that. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for joining us from beautiful Ontario, Canada. Hope to see you on the next clinic. This is Tim the Pool Man signing out.